Thanks for joining this quick start on Extender Configurator webinar. My name is Natalie, and today Anne and I will do a presentation on logging, alerts, and notifications for Sage 300 with Extender Configurator. Many Sage 300 partners and users know of Extender as a development and customization tool for Sage 300, creating custom scripts to automate, validate, and generally tailor Sage 300 to your specific business processes. In this quick start webinar, we will focus on what you can do with Extender Configurator without coding. And a reminder that all the Configurator functionality we described in this presentation is available when you have Extender Developer as well. So with Extender Configurator, you can do alert and logging. You can log when a user logs in, and you can also log changes to user setup and user profiles, anything to do with admin services in Sage 300. You can log changes to master files, and that includes AR, AP, GL, as well as third-party modules developed in the SDK. So we'll look at examples of changing an AR credit limit, logging changes to AR credit limit, as well as logging changes to EFT banks. You can also configure Extender to send email when records are changed. And we'll look at an example of an email notification when an EFT vendor is updated. And then we'll introduce the ability to send a conditional email using Extender workflow. So you've always been able to write a script to send a conditional email, but with workflow, you can do this without coding. And then we will have a closer look at quick start with workflow. To do first what we call advanced notification. So basically when you can send an email, but when the user is notified, they also need to log into the workflow console to complete the workflow, in effect acknowledging the notification. Then we can configure approval on record changes, such as master files, transaction headers like OE sales orders, purchase orders, IC adjustments, and batches. AP invoice or AP payment batches, AR invoice and receipt batches, etc. And to do this, you need to be a workflow user. So we will show you how to configure workflow user and what you can do to configure icons on the screens to make the process even easier and more transparent, where you can view the logs and the Extender workflow logs, progress the workflow as well from the relevant Sage 300 screens. With Extender Configurator, you can also, and using Orchid nodes, you can also configure it to automatically create an Orchid Information Manager node and view that node on other Sage 300 screens. You can configure Extender to call a third-party program to support integration between Sage 300 and other systems. We have demonstrated this on several occasions, in particular in the Extender training video, and we will not look at that in a lot of detail today. So in the first part of the presentation, our quick start demo, we have about 20 minutes and we'll show you how to configure logging and alerts for Extender. The examples we'll look at is configuring changes to user details, tracking the before and after value, and viewing the log reports. We will then configure logging on AR credit limits and configure logging on EFT banks. And as many of you are probably aware, we have been working on our web screens for the last few months, and we're getting closer to releasing them to the Sage 300 community. So in this presentation, we're really excited that we are demonstrating this using the EFT web screens that we are currently testing. So we'll show you the logging capabilities of the web screen as well. We'll then move on to configuring Extender to send an email. And our example is when an EFT vendor is inserted, which supports the EFT two-step approval process of new and vendor changes. And finally, we'll configure a workflow to send a conditional email when an OE order is greater than $5,000. And for this, we have a 20-minute video, so I think you're all familiar with the process there. I will start the video and you may have a few seconds.
In this quick start video for Extender, first we're going to download, install and activate Extender in our required company. We'll check our license and then we're going to configure users logging into Sage 300. We're also going to configure our email settings so our alerts can send emails. To download Extender, go to orchid.systems, log in, and then go to the product downloads. Select the version you want, and then download the module. And once downloaded, run the install shield. Because I already have Extender installed on this machine, it's going to pick up my current license files details, but you would typically key those in. And then connect to the required Sage 300 company and activate Extender. And when you check your Extender license, you will see what version of Extender you're licensed to run, in this case Configurator, Customizer and Developer. And it will show you which users have been configured as Workflow users and Workflow Anywhere users if you have a Workflow Anywhere license too. In the Extender options, we need to configure on the Email tab your email server details, and this is for you to send emails from Extender. And I'm just going to paste them in to save some typing. And send a test email to verify your details. And while we're here, we can configure to log when users connect to Sage 300. We have just downloaded, installed and activated Extender in our company. We checked the license and we've configured Extender in the setup options to log when users log into Sage 300 and configured our email settings. We're now going to test the logging of users when they connect to companies, and we're also going to configure an event to track when users' log-on details change. Now that we've turned on logging in options, if we disconnect and reconnect to the same company, and either through the reports or the inquiry screen, if we look at the log, we will see that admin has logged in to this company on the 22nd at 1 o'clock and then again on the 22nd at 3 o'clock. The first logging event we're going to set up is to track who changes Sage 300 users. So we're going to set up an event called log, and this is going to log changes. We're not going to combine because we want to see each and every change that happens, and we're going to log the change. Once we've created the event, we can go to our view events and scripts and attach that event to the appropriate views. The first time you load up your view list, it will build a list of all the views. So that's all the views belonging to all the modules that are active in this company. And if we filter on the admin services views, we see that AS0003 is the Sage 300 user. And we're going to attach our logging event on the upsert event, which is whenever a user is inserted or updated. And you will just restart the desktop for that new view to take place. And then go to Admin Services and change one of our users. We'll remove changed from Anne's name. And then either in the reports or the inquiry of the logs, we can see the different logins. And now we see that the AS0003 view has changed. Anne's username was changed from Anne Fouché changed to Anne Fouché. And if we change more than one field at the same time, and here we're going to change both the username and the email to address, we see both the username changing and the email to changing. So one log record for each field that got changed. And that is because we said don't combine in the event type. In the next example, we're going to configure Extender to log the changing of an AR credit limit. We're going to do changes both on the web screens and the desktop screens, and we're going to view the log for the before and after values of the credit limit. Logged into the same company as Anne, we're going to use the same log event and attach it to the AR customer view. And this time we're going to attach the log event to the individual field. And the customer credit limit is the AMT CR limped field. And we're going to reconnect to the company so that the subclass view is active. And logged in as Anne, we'll go to the AR customer, customer 1200, and change the credit limit from 20,000 to 25,000. And now we can view that change through the log, but we can also use the hotkey to open up the change to. So at 551, and change the 1200's credit limit from 20,000 to 25,000. And logged into the web screens as Susan. If she goes to a different customer, and changes the credit limit from 10,000 to 20,000, back in the audit trail, we can see Susan changed customer 1500's credit limit from 10,000 to 20,000, and Anne changed the 1200's customer credit limit from 20,000 to 25,000. So when you're using a don't combine event, then the before and after image for every field is stored in the log. The next two examples are using EFT processing. First, we're going to log changes in EFT banks, but for this one we're not trying to keep track of the before and after images. We just want to know when the EFT bank record was amended. And the second one, we're going to send an alert to inform somebody when a new EFT vendor is inserted, so that they know to go back to the EFT vendor and make the record active so it can be used in EFT Bank files. I have now activated EFT processing in this same company. And for the EFT banks, we want to keep track of whenever a bank record is changed in any way. So for that, we're going to create a new log event, which I'm going to call log combine, and select combine. So what this means is when any change happens to a record where we have a combine, then we just know that date and time who changed the record, not necessarily who changed what field from A to B. And this is useful for long records or records where you just want to know they've been amended. So in View Events and Scripts, we want to go and attach that log combine to the EFT Bank record, which is EL0001. And again, we're going to use the upsert event because we want to know either when it's inserted or updated. And this time we're going to choose the log combine. And logging in as Susan on the web screens, in EFT Setup Banks, for the bank record that has already been set up, we're going to change the account name and go ahead and save that record. And back in the Extender logs, in the inquiries, we can see Sue has done a change to EL0001, which is the EFT Banks, and the record that was changed was CCB, and it's been updated. In this next exercise, we're going to configure Extender to send an email to Steve every time a new EFT vendor is created. So Steve knows to go ahead and activate the EFT vendor record. For this notification, first of all, we need a message template. So this is the email message template when an EFT vendor is created or amended. And just copying from Notepad to save typing. And we can include fields from the record that's being amended in both the email body and in the email subject. Then we need to create an event type. And this event type is to send an email. Who are we going to email? And the email message ID is our EFT vendor new and amend. Whether or not we want the user, as they do their creation or amendment, to be told of this alert, we'll say no. And then we attach our event to the appropriate view. An EFT vendor is EL0006. And again on the upsert, we're going to attach our new event, EFT vendor. Logging in as Susan, and going to create a new EFT vendor record for vendor 1200. Steve has received this new email saying that the EFT vendor record for chloride systems has been created by Susan and needs to be reviewed and activated. And the last type of notification we're going to do is using Extender workflow. We're going to send a conditional email when an order is created, but only if the order is greater than $5,000. For this conditional email notification for large orders, we need an email message template. This is the email to be sent when a large order is created. And we're going to import a workflow template for these large order notifications. And this template can be downloaded from our website. And the workflow template starts. It has one step only. And when it starts, it sets the description. It sets the value of the variable to the invoice total. Evaluates if that invoice total is greater than $5,000. If it is, it goes to step 40 and it sends Steve an email, that email template that we just saw. And if it's not greater than $5,000, it goes to 60. It sets the status to no email and completes. But if it does send the email, it then sets the status to emailed sent and then completes. And the workflow template is attached to the OE order header, to the insert of the OE order header. It runs the order notification workflow template, and it goes into the start entry step. Logged in as Susan, we will create 2 orders. The first one for customer 1200, of 1000, giving us a total of 59,000, which exceeds 5,000. We just need to approve that. And we'll create a second order for customer 1500. And this time it'll be less than 5,000. In the Extender workflow summary, we will see the 2 orders. The second one we entered, where the order total was less than $5,000, it was closed with the current status of no email being sent. The first one we did $64,000, and the email was sent. And if we check in Steve's email, we'll see he's got the email for order 67, customer 1200, Mr. Ronald Black. It's been created, and the total amount before tax is $59,990.
Thank you, Anne. So in this presentation, we've reviewed the main steps to get started with Extender Configurator, installing, activate, and the initial configuration. We've looked at a range of examples which show you that you can choose what you log, which fields you want to log, whether you want to see the previous value and the new value, or just log that something has been inserted and changed. And you can combine a log entry with an email notification. You can do that for the same field change, or have an email alert saying something has changed and just log the detail of the 2 or 3 key fields where you want to track the before and after value. So you have flexibility in how you configure all that. And one of the main benefits of this framework is that the same applies to all the Sage 300 core modules: GL, AP, AR, PJC, OE, IC, PO, admin services, and third-party modules developed in the SDK, such as EFT, RMA, Norming Asset Management, Perisoft Cashbook, Technisoft Service Manager, etc. The logging and alerts work with Sage desktop screens as well as the web screens. And all your configuration is in the database, which means to upgrade, you only need to install and activate the latest version of Extender. In the second part of the presentation, we focus more on Extender workflow, both advanced alerts and approvals using workflow users. In our first example, we will build on our previous OE order notification, and the manager will receive an email, but we also need to log in to the workflow console to complete that workflow and acknowledge the email notification. So it's not an approval as such, as the order can still be processed, but there is an audit that the manager has viewed the notification, and then they can more easily go back to it in the audit log. To do this, we use the workflow user, so to access the console and to add the icons on the screens. So we'll show you a quick start of how to configure the workflow users and the icons on the screen. Then in our second workflow example, we set up approval around bank entries in conjunction with Sage Security and Customization Profile to ensure that the entries can only be posted through the workflow console. So user 1 will enter a bank entry in admin services, in common services, and user 2, who has access to post the bank entry, will post them through the Extender workflow. And as previously, we'll demonstrate all the key steps, but we do not build the workflow from scratch. We import a template that will be made available on the Orchid website in the next couple of days. So I'm now going to switch to our second workflow for alerts and approvals video.
In this first example, we're going to use Extender Workflow to notify a manager that a large order has been created. And rather than just receiving an email, the manager will need to use the workflow console and mark the notification or the workflow instance as read. So we're going to import a workflow template and an email template to use with this workflow template. We're also going to configure the managers as workflow users on the license screen, and then we're going to demonstrate entering the order as Susan, and then as Steve, we're going to go ahead, access the console, and acknowledge the notification. In our workflow company, I had previously activated Extender, and in the options on the email tab, had configured email, so Extender can send emails to notify people of workflow instances being created. And previously, I had imported some message templates, and the one we're going to use with this workflow notification workflow template is this one here. So when a order has been created and the dollar value is greater than our minimum of 5,000, it's going to send this email and then wait for the workflow instance to be approved. Our next step is to import the workflow template. And this template can be downloaded from our website, orchid.systems. And here's the workflow template. When the order is first created, it sets the description, sets the value to the order total, evaluates if the amount is greater than $5,000. If it is, it's going to do step 40, which is send the email with the order notification. Go to step 50, assign the user to admin, set the status as notified, and if the amount is not greater than 5,000, it's going to go to step 70, set the status no email needed, and complete. And once it's changed the status to notified, it's going to step 90, which is to go to our wait step. And in our wait step, we're waiting for the person to click the button saying mark as read, and the mark as read completes the workflow status and sets the status to read. So we're going to change this workflow template to assign the admin user to Steve and change the email notification to go to Steve. And now we need to attach our workflow template to the OE order view. So searching on the OE orders, the OE order header view is OE 0520. And on the Workflow tab, we're going to attach the workflow template to the insert, so when the order is first created. And the workflow we're going to run is our notification mark if read, and the entry step we're going to do is start. So when an order is inserted, it's going to start off the order notification mark off read, and the step it's going to do is start. And then in our license screen, we're going to go and make Steve a workflow user so he can access the console. So in your license screens, depending on the license that you've purchased, you are able to make users workflow users, in my case up to 10. And if you're using Workflow Anywhere, you need to say which users are Workflow Anywhere users too. So in making Steve a workflow user, Steve will now be able to access the workflow console and mark any notifications as read. So logging in as Susan, we're going to create 2 orders. One for customer 1200, where the order is going to be larger than our limit of 5,000. And a second one for custom comfort, which will be less than 5,000. Logging in as Steve, when he accesses the workflow console, and he's able to do this because we made him a workflow user, he sees this order number 72 waiting for him to mark as read, and his next action is mark on read. And Steve would have also received an email to this effect too. So from the console, Steve can mark as read, which completes the workflow instance. And any other user who has access can go to the workflow summary. We can see if we've created a few orders, but the last two, 72 and 73, are the ones we've been looking at. So order 72, order 72 has a status of mark as read, and if we look at the detail, we see it was created by Susan, and then it was in the wait state, and Steve clicked mark as read. Whereas the small order, order 73, the status was no email, and it was closed immediately. We have just seen how to access the workflow instances using the workflow console, but you are also able to access the workflow instances using icons on the Sage 300 screens. And we use Information Manager to configure the icons on the required Sage 300 screens. So in this next example, we're going to activate Information Manager, and we're going to configure an icon onto the OE order screen so that we can see which workflow instances are in progress and even progress a workflow instance from the OE order entry screen, just as we could with the workflow console. And we're also going to have a look at the logging icon and configure that around the AR customer screen. After downloading and installing Information Manager, you need to activate Information Manager in those companies where you need access to the workflow icons. And the workflow icons are configured on the Notes, DML and Extender Tray tab in IM Options. And clicking on the Details tab, as it's easier to work seeing all the fields that are relevant to your configuration row. The first type of configuration we're going to do is to extend a workflow. And we need to know the roto ID or the screen ID that we want to attach this workflow icon to. And in our case, it's order entry. So looking at the OE order transactions, looking at the properties, we see the roto ID is OE1100. And the field label that the workflow instance is associated with is the order number, order NO full stop. So we want to associate this configuration row with the OE1100 screen and with the field label order no full stop. And the workflow that it's associated with is the order notif mark red. And those users where the tray icon is automatically started and who are set up in Extender as a workflow user will see those icons. So I'm just going to set Susan up as a workflow user as well. So she'll be able to see the icons on the OE order entry screen as well as Steve. Now logged in as Susan, when she opens up the order entry screen, and for order 73, we see this new icon, the workflow icon. It's a grey arrow showing us there has been a workflow instance. It's not active anymore on this particular order. And when we select it, we go into the workflow history for this order, and we see that in the detail, Susan created this particular record. The workflow instance started when Sue created the order, and because it was less than 5,000, straight away the status was set to no email and it was closed. Whereas if we look at order 72 and drill into that history, you'll see it was started by Susan, and it was set into the wait state because the order value was greater than 5,000, and then Steve marked it as red, and that's what completed the workflow and set the status to red. If Sue creates a new order, which is greater than $5,000, when that order is inserted, the workflow instance is started, Steve has sent an email, and we can see the arrow is now green, which shows us that there's a workflow in progress for this order, and the next step is mark as red. It's not for Sue to mark as red, but she can still see what status it's in. And logged in as Steve, if he goes to that same order, the icon is now a person because this particular workflow instance is waiting for him to progress, and he could progress from here, or he could progress from the workflow console as we did previously. So Steve could progress from there, which completes the workflow instance. And to configure the extender log icon as an alternative to typing backtick tab to see the log changes on the customer screen, we note the field label is customer number for customers, and the roto ID is AR1300. Back in our IM options on the Notes DML Extender Tray tab, we're going to configure a new row. So we're going to configure the extender log for AR 1300, customer number field, and logging in as Sue or Steve. On the AR customer screen, we see the log icon. And when we click it, we see the same log of who changed the customer credit limit from what to what. In this example, we're going to control the posting of bank entries. We're going to attach a workflow template to the insert of a bank entry, and we're going to enable drill down from the workflow console back to the bank entry to have a closer look at the bank entry details. We will use a workflow icon on the bank entry screen to show that there's an active workflow instance in progress. And we'll use Sage Security and user profiles to control where the posting takes place for the bank entries. Approving on the workflow console will be what posts the bank entry. The configuration required for posting the bank entries, firstly we'll start off with the workflow template. I have downloaded the Post Bank Entries workflow template from the website and imported it. And we can see that the first step of the Post Bank Entries sets the description of the bank entry, sets the drill down from the workflow console back to the bank entry, and then checks if does a workflow already exist for this bank entry. If it does, then it's going to straight away set the description workflow already is active and auto close and complete this workflow instance. But if it's a new workflow instance, so when they first insert the record, it's going to assign the user to Steve, set the status for waiting to post, and then go to step wait. And the wait step has two progress to actions, approve or reject. If they approve, it's going to set the status to approved, post the bank entry, set the status to posted, and then set a few of the description fields and complete. If they reject, it's going to set the status to rejected and complete, so the bank entry will not be posted. And we have a step to handle any errors. The workflow template is then attached to the bank entries header. So on the workflow tab, it's been attached to the upsert, so when the record is inserted or updated, so that if it's rejected and then they go and do a change and then resave the bank entry, then the workflow instance will be started again. So whenever the record is inserted or updated, it's going to run the post bank entries workflow template and start on the check step. And in order to get the icons on the bank entry screen in Information Manager options, on the Notes DML Extender Tray tab, we've configured the bank entry screen. So the roto ID of the bank entry, the field label that's going to trigger the workflow, and which workflow to display. And the final part of this configuration is to do with the users. So in Admin Services, we have two security groups for bank services. The first one is all, and these people can post bank entries. And there's a second one for enter, where they cannot post bank entries. And Sue has been assigned to enter, and Steve has been assigned to all. But in order to control the posting and that Steve doesn't post through the UI, only through the workflow console, we have a customization on the bank transfer screen, and we hide the post button. using Sage's profiles. Logged in as Susan, we go ahead and create a bank entry. Sue is not able to post this bank entry, and we can see the workflow icon. The workflow instance has been started, and the next status is to either approve or reject. It's still a green arrow, so Sue knows it's in progress, but it's not for her to progress. Logged in as Steve, he can go to the workflow console, and he sees this bank entry number 3 waiting for him to approve or reject. But he can drill down to look at the bank entry. And on the bank entry screen, he sees the workflow icon as if he had opened the bank entry screen himself. And from here, he knows he can progress to approve or progress to reject this entry. And he's not able to post here. And if Steve approves here, the bank entry will be posted. And in the workflow inquiry, we see the bank entry, and looking at the details, it was first created by Susan, and it went into the wait state, and then Steve approved and took it from the wait state and approved and posted.
Thank you. So we've reviewed 2 workflow examples. One to mark a notification as completed in red and acknowledge the change. One to control approval and posting of bank entries, combined with Sage security and customization profiles. And more detailed training videos and documentation on configuring the workflow, including using the remote action service to approve outside of Sage 300, as well as the Workflow Anywhere mobile app. So Extender Configurator allows you to add workflow for notifications and approvals on all Sage 300 core modules and third-party SDK modules. I know it's a bit of a repeat, but we often get those types of questions. And that the workflow applies to master file, transaction headers, and batch headers. The same framework can be used across all Sage 300 modules. So now example of bank entries may not be required by everyone, but it's a new example that we are releasing on our website very shortly. And upgrades are only required to install and activate Extender for the new edition. You can start with some notifications and then add new ones as your business requirements change. When using Information Manager Notes and Extender, you have access to additional functionality. Extender can create a note automatically, which can then be viewed on other screens. And we have demonstrated this in a few other training videos and various webinars. So we're not going to show that today, but we have done a quick start video on using Extender and Information Manager Notes, which will be available on the website very shortly, and we will send you a link together with the link to the webinar recording. So in the example, we create a note, or Extender creates a note automatically when a credit limit is changed, and then we configure notes to display this note for the customer in order entry, in PJC contracts, and when entering an RMA in the RMA module. If you upgrade to Extender Developer, you also have access to even more functionality using notes. And again, there's a lot of example of that on the website. So with the Extender Configurator, you can manage your exceptions and your alerts with no coding. It increases the auditability of your business processes because changes that you want to track can be logged. And it promotes your business process visibility and transparency, particularly when you're using the workflow, where Users can view either in the console or on the workflow reports and inquiry screens and on the Sage 300 screens what the status of the different transactions and approvals are. Extender supports some of the common Sage 300 tools, such as upgrading by just installing and activating the new module, dumping and loading, and access to your standard reporting tools. You can upgrade from Extender Configurator to Extender Developer Edition for more customization options. It then unlocks the ability to use Python to write scripts to tailor Sage 300. You can use that to leverage existing open source libraries, for example, to connect to Microsoft Teams through a script or with a custom notification in Extender Workflow. You can create custom tables in Sage 300 that can be used in your scripts, and will also dump and load and upgrade with Extender. We will be uploading the new workflow templates that we demonstrated today on the Orchid website and relevant knowledge base articles in the next few days. So keep an eye on your newsletters for details on that, and we'll send you a link to the recording in the next few days. In the meantime, if you have any questions, please put them in the questions box as you're all in listen-only mode, and we are ready for your questions.
Thanks, Natalie. We do have a few questions sitting in the question box. The first one is logging and alerting and triggering workflows on third-party modules. So is it possible to trigger a workflow on norming fixed assets or Perisoft Cashbook or Auto Simply Manufacturing? And the answer to that is yes. We did see some interaction. We did some logging from EFT, but any third-party module that is created in the SDK and that has views, you are able to configure your logging event to be attached to that particular view, and you can log and alert. So log changes happening, alert via sending an email, automatically create an information manager note of that change, and it can trigger a workflow as well. So any third party with views like norming, Auto Simply, or Perisoft, you can configure Extender around those particular modules. Another question here, is it possible to send a copy of the order confirmation when sending the email? Yes, it is possible to do that. So you're saying, can we send the order confirmation to the approver so they can have a look at the order confirmation? Yes, that can be done, but not in Configurator. So Configurator doesn't have a custom action, it's a configured action saying send report. But there are examples on our website where we send the customer the order confirmation when the order is first created. So first it saves the order confirmation for document management link and to display later, and also emails to the customer. So that code, a copy of that code or an amendment of that code could be used, and then send an email, write your own custom action to send an email as part of the workflow. So you'd need developer edition of Extender to code and implement that custom action. Another question here, can you assign multiple users as approvers in this workflow? I'm not sure which workflow that was, whether it was the order confirmation one or whether it was the bank entry one. But yes, using workflow templates, you can have, we just demonstrated two very simple ones in the videos today, but you can have as a multi-level step. So you could have approver 1 needs to sign and then approver 2 needs to sign, or you could have the same workflow instance sent to multiple approvers, and the first one in that who it was sent to, the first one who gets there would do the approval. Or you could have two people, but it's not sequential, it's parallel, and you could keep track of that as well. And if you go to our website, look at the Extender page, or either go and search on workflow and filter your search to video, you'll see a lot of videos on Extender, many of them demonstrating multi-level approvers for purchase orders and GL batch postings, purchase requisitions, sales orders which are over the margin, many workflows. So have a look there. Natalie, can you think of a specific one which does multi-level?
I think on the video, I'm not sure. I can't remember on which video we're presenting that, but I think we've got an example of an AP invoice batch approval that has two approvers. We've also got a few examples where the person who actually entered the record can't approve. So they're both valid approvers, they're both part of a group, but if Steve has entered the record, even though Steve can approve something entered by Anne, Steve can't approve his own records. So you can also implement that in the workflow, and there's a few things on that in the help, in the knowledge base, and in the training videos.
I can't
see time for a few more questions. I see one more question. When you send email notifications, what's the easiest way to find the field names for the email notifications? And again, I think the answer to that is there are a couple of ways of doing it. There are a few worked through examples in the help, so you can copy and paste from that to get started. But for specific field names, you can use Extender inquiries view info to search your field names by description. So it makes it easier to find the exact name of the field that you want to put in your email notification. And in the help, there's also some examples of how to show in the email notification the original amount and the new amount. So can't see any more questions at this point. If you have any ones in the next few days, or when you receive the link to the webinar recording, you can contact us, at support@orchid.systems, and we'll get back to you. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day, and hope to see you next month for next webinar. Topic yet to be defined. And we hope that you learned something from today's presentation, how easy and cost-effective Extender Configurator can be.
Thanks for your time, and speak to you next month. Bye.
Bye.